We lost several wide receivers to injury in week 7, but don't worry. We have several wide receiver trade targets to help you weather the storm on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also read me at the 33rd team. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also check her out at Yahoo Fantasy. On today's show, we're going to be taking a look at all of the wide receiver injuries across the NFL in week 7. Some big name receivers that you should target and some deep dive receivers that will help you win your leagues this season. But Kate, let's start with that Monday Night Football game between the Ravens and Buccaneers. Lost Mike Evans early to a hamstring injury. Did score a touchdown. Probably should have scored 2 touchdowns in this game. Later on in the game, Chris Godwin leaves with a season-ending ankle injury. These are both just devastating injuries for players that were very productive this year.
Very, very productive. We've now lost several starting wide receivers in our fantasy football lineups over the past 48 hours here. Between Brandon Aiyuk, it's just been kind of a hogwash. Now, Mike Evans, not done for the year. We haven't heard any sort of formal update on how long-term his injury may be, but I have to imagine he came into this week with a hamstring injury. It seemed pretty severe. The way that he landed immediately grabbed at that hamstring and seemed to be like just about writhing in pain. And we know Mike Evans, very tough dude, wanted to play this game to begin with, despite already having the injury. And we know sometimes these re-aggravations can be way more gnarly than the initial injury in the first place. You have to imagine that they're full of regret. Chris Godwin, it just feels like such a fruitless injury here, playing in garbage time, less than a minute left to go in the game. And he was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver throughout the course of the year. This was his big breakout bounce back season. I had no doubt in my mind that with the way Baker Mayfield was playing, with the way the offense has been constructed, that he was going to maintain that wide receiver 1 value rest of season. So this is just all absolutely devastating news for our fantasy lineups.
Yeah, you mentioned that Evans should be back. It remains to be seen how long he's out. There was a report on the sideline yesterday that he was having trouble getting his shoes on after the game because that's how bad the hamstring injury is. So I would assume, Kate, like he's going to have a 4-game stint on IR at best, right? So that's going to be a lengthy one. I wanted to ask you about Chris Godwin because he's obviously out for this year. He turns 29, I believe, in January or February. He's a unrestricted free agent. That seemed like a pretty wicked injury. How much do you think this is going to hurt his dynasty value moving forward?
It's hard because obviously, like we've seen, in prior instances, Tony Pollard, for example, some of these lower body injuries, even once the mechanism of the injury itself has healed, it doesn't necessarily mean the conditioning of that limb is in the same spot. Now, Chris Godwin, obviously slated back as the primary slot receiver for the Buccaneers. The slot does have just some kind of natural benefits in terms of like creating separation just based on the nature of the types of routes you're running out of the slot here. So like by nature, I'm still in on Chris Godwin. And I'm, if I'm in a rebuild situation, this might be an opportunity to target him, especially given, he's not going to be available to rest of season. He's hitting free agency next year. There's that uncertainty. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs bring him back and he tries to close out his career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, especially with the fact that, Baker Mayfield is under their contract long-term. So I think this could be a buy low opportunity for Chris Godwin, especially now that he's kind of back in his natural position. And
Can we
obviously
do a
wishing him a smooth recovery.
quick price check just to kind of see where his value at? Khalil Shakir or Chris Godwin?
If I'm going to rebuild, I'll take Chris Godwin.
Okay. Dontavian Wicks.
Godwin.
Keon Coleman.
Maybe it's the recency bias of a big week, but I might take Coleman there.
Okay, so we're looking at Godwin, who was being drafted as wide receiver 30 going into the month of October, probably down to wide receiver 40 or so after the injury. It's definitely a drop, but I don't think it's a super significant one. It's just a really unfortunate injury for Chris Godwin. But okay, let's talk about some big name receivers. So let's say you lost Brandon Aiyuk, you lost Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. Who are some of the more well-known wide receiver targets that you're going after right now?
This might be like one of the most obvious trade targets, but I think this is actually a good time to go ahead and buy low on Deebo Samuel, who, by the way, also might not be playing here in week 8. He's currently hospitalized with pneumonia. He does not have a timetable for return. But the good news about that is it's a medical problem, right? It's not a football injury. And I do think that, yes, even if he's not available here in this week, if he's not available until after the bye, I think you're probably going to have a bona fide top 10 wide receiver down the stretch, just based on necessity. I think they're going to have to feed him as many touches as humanly possible. We still don't really know what Ricky Pearsall is yet. He's obviously making his own way back from an injury. How about Marvin Harrison Jr.? We can talk more about him later because we're going to close out the show.
Let's save him because I want to hold him. A couple other, like if you're going for a bigger name guy, what about somebody like Garrett Wilson? I think his value is suppressed now that Devontae Adams is there. They had another bad game. He had a bad showing against Pittsburgh. I don't know if you knew this, but he dropped a pass that led to an interception, Kate. Still a little bitter about that. Is Garrett Wilson somebody that you would be willing to give up assets for to go and acquire?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, like I love betting on talent. I that's kind of the go-to move. I think we're finally starting to see that connection with Russell Wilson, or with sorry, other side of the ball, Aaron Rodgers start to develop there. But yeah, betting on talent, because I think as we've seen over the past couple of seasons, betting just on situation here is not a given. I don't think any of us would have expected just a few years ago, watching Devontae Adams in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, that we would see both of them move on from the franchise and then end up back together again. And like, circumstances change very quickly. So I think Garrett Wilson, all in. How about T. Higgins? One of the more intriguing options. He's been coming on as of late. He's been healthy, gonna be a free agent next year, at least, barring some surprising extension with the team. Are we like, what are we doing with T. Higgins here? I need to know.
So, full transparency, I traded for T. Higgins in a Dynasty league this morning for a couple of different reasons. I gave up. I'll tell you what I gave up. I gave up a 2025 first-round pick that, listen, I think is going to be pretty low or pretty high, I guess. I think it's going to be like low. I think it's going to be like pick 10, 11, or 12.
Yeah, low is the word.
Right. The reasoning is, I think the rest of this year, he's going to give you top 15 value. In fact, Kate, it might even be higher than that when you look at the rest of the receivers around the league. Like, if everybody was healthy, maybe he's giving you top 16 numbers. But man, when you consider like Chris Olave is banged up and doesn't have a quarterback, and Nico Collins is out, and Puka Nacua is out, and Rashee Rice is out, and DK Metcalf is out now. There's just so many of these high-end wide receivers that aren't producing that I think T. Higgins is going to be able to outproduce. On top of that, I was on over the cap this morning, looking at which teams have a lot of cap space next year. And it's like New England. Oh, I would love to see T. Higgins play with New England. That'd be really fun. The Chargers, like, sign me up, right? Justin Herbert and T. Higgins. Washington, Jane Daniels and T. Higgins would be a lot of fun. And I also think there's a chance that he's just back in Cincinnati. So I think he's going to land in a pretty good spot. He's 25 years old. I had no issues at all giving up a first-round pick for T. Higgins. None.
I love that. How about Brian Thomas Jr., who's kind of like a forgotten child? I know he's been coming on. He has been a top 10 wide receiver in 3 of the last 4 weeks here. The Jaguars, I don't think anybody like wants to invest in the Jaguars offense, but I do think looking at all of these rookie wide receivers who hold a lot of value in Dynasty right now. Malik Neighbors drafted on average wide receiver 2 in the latest batch of Dynasty startup ADP. Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 6. I think Brian Thomas Jr. Has probably the most upside, at cost there in terms of what he might be able to offer just this year alone, paired with the long-term value. Like, he might very reasonably outproduce Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, and you can get him for much, much cheaper than Marvin Harrison Jr.
So same league I was in, I got offered Puka Nacua straight up for Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I probably made a mistake, but I said no. Brian Thomas Jr. is healthy. He's playing with a younger quarterback, and he's making plays down the field right now. Puka's really struggled with injuries, not only in the NFL, but all the way going back to college. And it's one of the reasons that he fell to day 3. I'm full agreement. You start doing your rankings, like not only just rest of season, but like moving forward, you run out of names real quick that you would rather have over Brian Thomas Jr. I couldn't be more in, Kate. I'm so excited about Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I actually think if you are in a position where you've been decimated by injuries, but you maybe started out the year, 6-1, 5-2, and you're in the playoff hunt, there are a lot of interesting options that I think offer a lot of high upside rest of season that will not cost you top 5 dynasty wide receiver prices.
All right, but let's talk about some receivers if you just need bodies, because I have a few teams where just decimated at wide receiver, where I had Rashee Rice and Brandon Aiyuk and Chris Olave, and I just can't play any of those guys anymore. So which receivers could you go out and steal to help you win a championship this year? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page that you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Listen, I love betting on the season awards. And right now, after we're through 7 weeks, almost halfway through the season, you start to get a pretty good idea of who's going to win these awards. Lamar Jackson is now the favorite to win MVP. I think that one's still up in the air, but I'm looking at the Defensive Player of the Year odds because right now TJ Watt's the favorite, but there's a lot of really good options, including Brian Branch, Xavier McKinney, Dexter Lawrence, value all over the board. So go right now to FanDuel.com. Go check out all of the lines for the futures bets and, of course, Week 8. Make your first $5 bet, and you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed that you can use on anything. That is FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses go to qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are breaking down all the action from Monday Night Football. Okay, let's talk about some trade targets. If you don't want to spend up for a Brian Thomas or a Garrett Wilson, who are some cheaper wide receiver options that'll help you get through the rest of the regular season?
Should we bring back Pop Douglas? I know Demario Douglas just burned fantasy managers just this past week because he was everybody's kind of like favorite, waiver wire trade, whatever pick up and play. Like everybody was in on Demario Douglas this week. It didn't pan out. But I do think rest of season, he could be in a really interesting spot here. I think he was dealing with some sort of injury, something, what have you. And truth be told, he has been the only reliable receiving option here outside of Hunter Henry for this New England Patriots offense. You look at Jalen Polk, a wide receiver who I think has a lot of long-term potential, not clicking right now. Like it had a ton of drops, like just not in a position to help the team there right now. But I think with Drake May at quarterback, Pop Douglas could be a kind of weekly wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 rest of season. And feels like he's kind of free in dynasty leagues, especially after that stinker of a dud once everybody went all in week 7.
So that's a good one. I'm going with Darnell Mooney, somebody who has been a little bit more productive than Pop Douglas. Moody's been on the field for basically every snap for Atlanta. The Falcons playing a bunch of dome games coming up. I think they're going to be in a lot of shootouts. Mooney's also been productive. Like he's been somebody that you can trust week in and week out. I have to imagine, Kate, the further on that we get into the season, that Kirk Cousins is going to look healthier and healthier. Now he's never going to be able to move and he's not going to escape the pockets, but I think he's going to trust his legs a little bit more. Darnell Mooney is a clear-cut wide receiver 2 in this offense. And I think you can get him pretty cheap right now in the month of October. Do you want to guess where he was being drafted among wide receivers?
Wide receiver 50?
Close. Wide receiver 56, right?
Yeah.
So you can get him. The receivers being drafted next to him. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 55. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver 57. You can get him pretty cheap, and that's a starting caliber receiver.
No kidding. Is this the time to talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba again? I don't know. But he leads all wide receivers in terms of routes run, right? Like we want to talk about some high volume potential players. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba has to be on the list just for the fact that he's been incredibly disappointing to this point. Like hasn't looked like the superstar we thought he was. I feel like everybody's just kind of hitting the panic button on him. But the thing is, he has 54 total targets on the year. That is tied for the 9th most among all wide receivers. He leads all wide receivers in terms of routes run this year. I don't know if anything's going to come to it. I don't know. But what I do know is that, Geno Smith, a good quarterback who's playing good football, the touchdown regression feels like it should be on the way in a long-term way. And the passing volume is there. So like you need volume. I'm just kind of looking to the Seahawks and seeing like, where can I get in on that action?
All right. That's a good one. How about a receiver that's playing in 80% of the offensive snaps, 90% over the last 3 games, and is attached to a good quarterback? Would you be interested in that?
I suppose you could sell me on that. What you got?
I could sell you on Jalen Tolbert, who cost you absolutely nothing right now. 15 targets over the last 2 games. Again, although is he gonna win you your week in fantasy? Absolutely not. But if you want a receiver that's going to be playing in, I think, a lot of shootout games coming up because the Cowboys defense is awful. Brandon Cooks is on the injured reserve list. He has to miss at least 2 more games. Telling you right now, he's going to be missing more than 2 games with a knee injury. I think Jalen Tolbert is somebody who's going to run a bunch of routes, and I think Dak is going to get better as the year goes on. I'm buying Jalen Tolbert.
I think that's a great buy, and also just very like low key. That's not a name that people are going to probably really fight you on here. Let's go back to the 49ers offense, right? I already talked about Deebo Samuel. Let's talk about Juwan Jennings, who we did see play a big role when asked to step up in early on in the season when they were mauled with injury. They're back at it, right? Juwan Jennings is going to need to play a key role in this offense as the wide receiver 2. TBD on the return of Christian McCaffrey, who, we know plays a key role in the offense in the receiving game. And we don't even know, once he's on the field, we've heard this has been kind of like, this is a workload management kind of injury, right? Are they going to limit his snaps? I don't really know. I don't know what to expect when he gets back to the field, but I do know that Jawan Jennings has played some excellent football this season and
Love it.
should be in line for a decent amount of playing time here.
I think that's my favorite buy so far. I'm going to give you one more. Okay, I want to see if you can figure this one out. Can I interest you in a 24-year-old wide receiver who's off to the best start of his career, that's playing with a let's call him a borderline great at quarterback, all-time great at quarterback, who's already has over 400 receiving yards this year and averaging nearly 19 yards a catch?
Is it George Pickens?
No, George Pickens. Oh, I guess you could call Russell Wilson the all-time
I was like a little rude to include him in the deep wide receiver targets here, Marcus. Who is
Rashad Bateman is averaging 19 yards a catch this season from the Lamar Jackson. He's playing almost 75% of the offensive snaps. He's finally healthy, and I think that matters. Like, you're seeing him actually make plays down the field, and he's just not in jeopardy of losing any snaps to anybody else. Like, Zay Flowers clearly has the role in this offense. Bateman's the number 2. Nelson Aguilar comes in every once in a while. This is the most receiving yards that Bateman has had in a season since his rookie year, Kate.
Also, most receiving touchdowns.
Yeah.
He
looks really good.
He looks really good. I gotta tip the cap on that. We've been on Rashad Bateman. I think it was each of the last 2 weeks in our promotion commotion.
Yep.
And it has paid off. He has been returning like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 value pretty consistently here in the last several weeks. So I'm excited to see kind of just what he can do in this offense that's obviously going to score a ton of points with an MVP quarterback now that he's finally healthy.
George Pickens, get out of here. Ridiculous. All right, let's talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. Brought him up in segment 1. Another really quiet day, 21 total yards over his last 2 games. Are you concerned? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. One of my favorite things about Gametime is that they're going to show you a panoramic view of your seat before you buy your tickets. I've told you guys this before, but I like sitting in the end zone when I go to football games. I like to be able to see all the players, but I don't like sitting where the goalposts are in my way. So I like to be either right directly in the middle or off to the side a little bit. On Gametime, you're going to know exactly what your seats look like, what the field looks like with their panoramic view. Plus, they have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. They do a fantastic job covering the NFL. Check it out wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. All right, Kate, let's talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. Going into the month of October, he was being drafted as wide receiver 6 overall. Has not really lived up to that. It's been very, very quiet the last couple of weeks. Are you concerned about Marvin Harrison Jr. at all?
I'm not. I think this could be a really interesting buy low opportunity. Now, I think some of the disappointment with Marvin Harrison Jr. might just be also, some of the fact that, everybody else is kind of killing it, right? We've talked about Brian Thomas Jr. We've talked about Malik Neighbors and the fact that he's already a superstar wide receiver. But I also think that we're kind of forgetting that, sometimes we need to offer these rookies a little bit of grace. Also dealt with a concussion last week that forced him out of action. there's going to be some bumps and bruises in terms of integrating him into the offense as a rookie. And I just don't know that your perception of a player that we had dubbed a generational talent at the position can change that quickly. How?
How do I say this? I'm not
You
concerned
can be
about
disappointed without overreacting. That's what
correct.
I think. I'm disappointed. Yeah. Sure. Am I overreacting? No. Like
I'm not overreacting in the sense that like I still fully believe in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s talent. He's going to get there. I don't think the Cardinals have done him any favors. They basically have made him the sacrificial lamb at the X receiver spot, lined him outside, have not moved him around much at all. And it's why you're seeing guys like Greg Dortch get more opportunities and Michael Wilson and Trey McBride. And I think that'll come the more that he plays. I think they're going to figure out ways to use him the best. But has it been great? No. I guess the only thing you have to consider is this something that gets better this year? Or does he get better next year? Because I think everybody will agree, like the production's coming. It's just how quickly do the Cardinals start designing their game plan to get Marvin Harrison Jr. more touches?
I think this might be a case of like the bye week explosion, the post bye week explosion here. They've got a week 11 bye, and then I think, not necessarily like a super great matchup in week 13. They get the Vikings. Don't love that, but like there are plenty of solid matchups on the board in the second half of the season for this team that, like, let's say they take the bye week, regroup a little bit. We see this a lot with rookies where maybe they haven't been like the focal point, maybe they haven't been integrated in the offense in like an ideal circumstance, but once they get the basics, once they get the initial reps in the offense, they can go back to the bye week and say, or go back during the bye week and say, like, what else can we add into this mix to add a little bit more to this rookie's plate? Mix up some of the routes he's running, mix up some of the usage, and generate touches for him. Just find a way to get the ball in his hands. And I think that's what we might be able to see here week 12 onward, week 13. Week 12 onward. And maybe like potentially win you your fantasy football playoffs. I mean, hello, you've got the Panthers week 16, you've got the Rams in week 17.
So just to do a little price check here, I'm going to name you all the receivers that are currently being drafted ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. You tell me if you take any of these guys, if you would take Harrison over any of these guys. Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
No, that's probably right where I'd rank him. So
receivers being drafted after Marvin Harrison Jr. Nico Collins.
I'll take Marvin Harrison Jr.
AJ Brown.
Marvin Harrison.
Puka Nacua.
Marvin Harrison.
Chris Olave.
Marvin Harrison. Yeah. Here on out.
One more for you. Jaden Reed.
Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay. Although I love Jaden Reed. That was a weak spot for me, but yes.
So not panicking, not moving at all. It's going to come. Just be patient. If you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't think this is a bad time to send out some offers just to see if the dynasty manager that has Marvin Harrison Jr. would take 90 cents on the dollar, because we see people get panicked all the time. Give you an example. We had a couple trades the last couple of days, Kate. Marvin Harrison Jr. straight up for Nico Collins, even after the injury. Marvin Harrison Jr. for A.J. Brown and J.K. Dobbins. Marvin Harrison Jr. for Garrett Wilson and Devon Achane. Like, I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. is gettable now, where I don't think he was a month ago.
Yep, I think that's a great call.
Okay. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you check out that Locked On NFL show, 2 shows every single day. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we'll be right back here tomorrow with Matt Williamson.